You just paid $12,000 for a city that is quietly falling apart, and nobody in the tourism industry will say it to your face. The hotel staff will smile, the concierge will hand you a brochure, the tour guide will point at the skyline. But the moment the shift ends, something else comes out entirely. Because the people who keep this machine running, the ones polishing the marble floors before you wake up and refilling the minibar after you leave, they have started to talk. And what they are saying does not match the billboard. Dubai is empty, not metaphorically, physically empty. Walk through the Dubai Mall on a Tuesday afternoon and count the people. The Burj Khalifa observation deck, a landmark that used to require reservations weeks in advance, now offers same-day availability. Hotel floors on the Palm Jumeirah are sitting unoccupied for days at a stretch. A hospitality industry veteran with 15 years in the Gulf described it recently as the lowest point he had ever seen the market, and the market was still posting record numbers when he said it. That is the first contradiction worth understanding, because Dubai's official story and Dubai's actual story have been moving in different directions for a while now, and the gap between them is exactly where this video lives. Let's start with what the numbers actually say, because they are being used to tell two completely different stories at the same time. Through most of 2025, Dubai's hotel sector was performing at roughly 79% occupancy. Revenue per available room was up 10% year-on-year. And the city welcomed close to 20 million international visitors. On paper, a record. By every headline metric, Dubai was winning. Then February 2026 arrived. Regional conflict escalated. Airspace across the Gulf was disrupted. And what happened next was nearly instantaneous. Industry analysts reported hotel occupancy collapsing to below 20% within days. On some days in the second half of February, revenue per available room fell by 25% compared to the same period the year before. Luxury hotels that had been charging premium rates were slashing prices by 40% and still struggling to fill rooms. One hotelier described the market as being at its lowest point in living memory. That is a dramatic reversal. But what makes it worth examining closely is not the speed of the collapse. Geopolitical shocks move fast, and everyone understands that. What makes it worth examining is what the collapse revealed underneath, because a structure that goes from record performance to single-digit occupancy in 2 weeks was not as solid as the record numbers suggested. The workers understood this before the investors did. The complaints were not about conflict. They predate it by months. What hospitality staff across Dubai had been describing quietly, in interviews given on condition of anonymity, in comment sections, in accounts passed between industry forums, was a creeping pattern of visitors who arrived excited and left feeling cheated. Not disappointed, cheated. There is a difference, and it matters. Disappointment is when something does not match your expectations. Cheated is when you do the math afterward and realize the exchange was fundamentally unfair. And in Dubai, the math had become very difficult to justify. A standard hotel room at a mid-range property on Sheikh Zayed Road averages $280 per night in high season. That is more expensive than comparable hotels in Paris, Tokyo, or New York. A family of 4 visiting for 5 days, accommodation, food, attractions, transport, will spend somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000. Breakfast at a hotel restaurant, $45 per head. Dinner for 2 at a Dubai Marina restaurant without alcohol, between $80 and $120. The Burj Khalifa observation deck at peak hours, over $100 per person. An indoor theme park like IMG Worlds of Adventure, nearly $100 for a single day. Waiters reported watching tourists open menus and go visibly quiet, not browsing, calculating, sharing dishes, skipping desserts, choosing not to go out at all. Review sites began accumulating the same phrase in dozens of languages. Not worth it. Here is the thing about that phrase. It is not a complaint about quality. Dubai's hotels are well run. The service is professional. The infrastructure is genuinely impressive. Not worth it is a verdict about value, about whether what you received justified what you paid. And increasingly, visitors were deciding it did not. The heat makes this calculation harder every year. Not as a minor inconvenience, as a structural problem that is compressing Dubai's viable tourism calendar from both ends. From May through September, daytime temperatures exceed 42 degrees Celsius regularly, 108 degrees Fahrenheit, with coastal humidity approaching 90%. On desert safari, operators describe tourists arriving at the staging area excited and becoming visibly distressed before the vehicles have even moved. Heat exhaustion incidents have increased sharply over the past 3 years. Workers who run these tours describe carrying more water, scheduling more stops, and still watching guests deteriorate faster than they used to. The city's answer has been to build more indoor attractions, but indoor attractions have a ceiling that no amount of capital can raise. They offer the same experience you can have in any major city in the world: a climate-controlled ski slope, an air-conditioned shopping mall the size of a small town. The question tourists are increasingly asking, and not quietly enough for the tourism board's comfort, is a simple one. Did I cross the planet to go inside a building? Now, climate scientists studying Gulf cities have introduced a concept that deserves more attention in this context: wet bulb temperature limits, the threshold at which the human body can no longer cool itself, even at rest, even in shade. Dubai has not crossed that line, but regional projections show the city moving toward it on the current trajectory. Travelers who research their destinations are reading these projections, and they are routing around the risk. Meanwhile, a competitor with far deeper pockets and far deeper history has been watching all of this very carefully. Saudi Arabia committed $800 billion to tourism development through Vision 2030. That figure is not an abstraction. It is infrastructure. It is UNESCO World Heritage sites in Alula that took thousands of years to build and cannot be replicated with money. It is the Riyadh Season Festival drawing audiences that would previously have defaulted to Dubai. It is a western coastline with more moderate temperatures and Red Sea resorts that do not require guests to spend their vacation indoors. The strategic logic is blunt, and it works. Everywhere Dubai is expensive, Saudi prices to undercut it. Everywhere Dubai lacks authentic cultural depth, and beyond the last 60 years of oil money, there is genuinely very little in the official narrative. Saudi leverages 3,000 years of history that no amount of development spending can manufacture. And in June 2025, Saudi Arabia formally abolished the kafala sponsorship system for workers, replacing it with contract-based employment. This matters not just for labor rights, but for competitiveness. The reform signals to international talent, international investors, and international visitors that the kingdom is actively modernizing its relationship with the people inside it. The UAE has not made that move, which brings us to what may be the most uncomfortable part of this story. The people who run Dubai's tourism experience, the concierges, the housekeepers, the tour guides, the servers, are overwhelmingly migrant workers from South Asia, the Philippines, and East Africa. And the system that governs their presence in the country, the kafala sponsorship model, ties their residency directly to their employer. Under this arrangement, workers cannot change jobs without their sponsor's permission. They cannot leave the country without their sponsor's permission. If they leave their employer to escape mistreatment, they risk deportation for the crime of absconding. Human Rights Watch has documented this for years. The U.S. State Department noted in formal reporting that the UAE government rarely investigated violations of its own kafala regulations, including the most basic ones, like the rule against employers confiscating passports. Passport confiscation, in practice, remains common. An entry-level hospitality worker in Dubai earns between $300 and $500 a month. No minimum wage exists for migrant workers. No unions are permitted. The worker who presses your shirts earns in a month what you spend on a single dinner. As hotel occupancy has dropped and margins have tightened, management responses have included cutting staff and increasing room assignments for housekeeping, from 14 rooms per day to 18, with no adjustment to wages. Workers describe running between floors, making errors, not receiving complaints, and absorbing the consequences. I keep coming back to something a worker said when asked how they describe Dubai to people back home. Not a dream, they said, a necessary sacrifice. Because at home, there is no alternative. That sentence carries a lot. The entire hospitality infrastructure of one of the wealthiest cities on earth is being maintained by people who describe their presence in it as a sacrifice, not a choice. That is not incidental to Dubai's tourism problem. It is structural to it. When the people sustaining a luxury experience are themselves being treated as disposable inputs, that eventually shows up in the quality of the experience, and in what those people say when someone finally asks them the right question. The authenticity problem runs deeper still, though it is harder to quantify. Tour guides in Dubai describe hitting a wall around the 10-minute mark when asked about local history. Before the oil discovery of the 1960s, the official tourism narrative offers almost nothing to work with. What fills the space is superlatives: the tallest, the largest, the most visited, the most expensive. These land well on first encounter. They leave nothing on the second. Emiratis represent less than 11% of the city's population. What visitors receive as cultural experience is largely choreographed performance. Desert safaris following an identical formula across every single operator. The same camel, the same generic buffet, repeated each night with the same choreography. Workers in the sector describe this openly, if not publicly, as theater, not cultural immersion, theater. The Burj Khalifa could be in Shanghai. Then the Dubai Mall could be in New York. The Palm Jumeirah, for all its engineering, is an artificial sandbank with expensive hotels. Nothing about it is specifically irreducibly Dubai. Modern travelers, particularly younger ones, are increasingly not just looking for luxury. They are looking for truth, for a place to understand, not just photograph. And social media, which built Dubai's image faster than any marketing campaign could have, has become the thing that unmasks it. The filters come down. What remains is an enormous, expensive, car-centered urban grid in the middle of a desert. Impressive in scale, legible in purpose, and somehow deeply empty of the thing that makes a place worth returning to. So here is where Dubai actually stands in early 2026. Now a geopolitical shock exposed structural vulnerabilities that record numbers had been papering over for years. Hotel occupancy at crisis lows, luxury rates slashed, a regional competitor with more money, more history, and a recently reformed labor system accelerating its tourism ambitions. A climate trajectory that is shrinking the viable season. A workforce operating under conditions that Human Rights Watch characterizes as facilitating exploitation, with no meaningful reform on the horizon. A cultural product that tourists are increasingly describing, in the aggregate language of review sites, as not worth what it costs. Dubai has reinvented itself before. Turning a pearl fishing settlement into a global financial hub in 2 generations is a genuinely remarkable achievement, and that deserves to be said plainly. Where the infrastructure is real, the ambition is real. The question is whether reinvention this time requires something harder than building the next record-breaking structure, whether it requires asking who the city is actually for, and whether the answer can change. The workers already know what they think. They have been telling anyone willing to listen for a while now. The question is whether anyone with the power to act on it is paying attention. If this raised questions you want to think through, about Gulf tourism, the kafala system, or what happens when a city's image outpaces its reality, leave them below. And if you want to go deeper on how destination cities rise and fall, the next video takes this further.